Hi, and welcome to the Keys to Therapy. On today's episode, we have Victoria talking about her experiences as a therapist and her life now. So, welcome, Victoria.
I'm Victoria. I am a licensed mental health therapist. I see clients in Nebraska and in North Carolina. I actually managed to see in both states face to face and virtual. I like to go back every now and again. I'm currently in North Carolina, and I specialize in working with adults for trauma, substance use issues, grief and loss. And then lately it's been performance issues around the workplace. Um, Fun little ditty. I actually live on a farm. So I get to include my horses and farm animals in therapy, and have sessions outside on my property.
Yay. And I've been to the property and it's beautiful, and the horses are beautiful, and the pigs is my goddaughter. And there's a lot of really cute stuff happening over there. So, just
Yeah.
put that out there. We'll definitely do another video where you can show like what it's like there and talk to us about equine interactions and stuff, because we've got to follow up and show all the animals. So,
Yeah. They are a fun welcome committee.
they're beautiful. Oh, and two dogs too. So,
Yeah.
well, tell me a little bit about what made you decide to become a therapist. Like, how'd you get into this field?
So it's actually a really fun question. Most of the time I get clients who actually ask me that.
Yeah.
Um, I became a therapist because my dad was actually deployed quite a bit when I was growing up, and had back then they were called guidance counselors, not like school
Mhm.
therapists, um, that I got to see quite a bit outside of school settings. And I just really appreciated their modeling and kind of being there when I needed the help. And so the original approach or wanting to do this was to help veterans in their kind of recovery from military active duty to civilian life. So yeah, that kind of is what got me hooked, so to
That's
speak.
awesome. Well, what was your undergrad in?
So my undergrad was in two things. It was in psychology, and I got a like added in social work.
Okay.
I went to a Christian undergrad, and they had what's called Christian social ministries, but it
Mhm.
actually converted into like a minor in social work. Um, and then after that, I had decided that I really wanted to go to a state school. My husband and I had moved to Nebraska, my love state, and decided to go to the University of Nebraska for my master's in clinical mental health counseling. So I graduated from a K-CREP school, got um, my master's and a master's enhancement for drug and alcohol counseling from that.
Wow.
So I graduated with like more hours.
Yeah. Well, what made you pick that path? Because I know sometimes in undergrad, especially like psychology is so broad, there's a lot of different licenses and ways you could go. So why was that the path that you picked?
Well, I wasn't too sure about social work. I think I wanted it to be more of like a clinical application. And at that time, I had heard that social work was a little bit more case management, less therapeutic in that kind of capacity from what I had kind of like gathered.
Mhm.
Um, and so there was that kind of experience, I guess, that I wanted to have a little bit more clinical background. Not to mention the school that I was going to was a bit cheaper at that time,
Mhm.
and really kind of appreciated the K-CREP style of things. I wasn't sure what the social work requirement was for it. Looking back on it, I probably should have gotten my social work degree. It would have made my life a little bit easier than it is. But I think the times are catching up, so pretty soon it's going to be irrelevant.
Yeah, I agree. And the social work thing, I mean, no one talked to me about what that meant in undergrad. I thought social work immediately meant like social services, and
Yeah.
you're dealing with like food stamps and foster care and stuff like that. So that never even crossed my mind as
Mhm.
a master's program to take until I started talking to some people. And then they were like, oh, you could be a therapist with it. So who knew? But Yeah, that makes sense. And your program, what was it structured like? Because I know each grad school program is kind of different.
As far as
Like I know for mine, it was like 2 days of internship the first year and then 3 days of classes. And then the second year was like 3 days of internship and then all classes. And some people have had like their first year be all classes and their second year internship. So what did
yeah.
yours look like?
So I had classes for the first like year and a half,
Okay.
and then you had classes with a practicum. I was I will rant and rave about the University of Nebraska at the Kearney location. Um, till the cows come home, because they did had their own like counseling program like services. So all of my practicum hours I could do at the university as long as I found my own like clients for that. And so it's very different to what students are experiencing here in North Carolina from what I've witnessed,
Hmm.
where they have to go find a practicum site,
Oh, wow.
then and then have those kinds of supervisors take care of everything. I didn't have that. I had a supervisor literally like looking into our session, videoing those kinds of things at the university. And then after that, they encourage you to do your internship. It was 600 hours, 300 direct and 300 indirect. You had to take one or two classes, adjacent to taking your internship.
Mhm.
And you wanted to make sure you had your internship site like a year in advance.
It's a
Because
lot.
some of the really good ones are pretty competitive. Um, yeah, so a little bit of class heavy up front and then application heavy in the back end.
Okay. Did you like how that was structured, especially now looking back?
I really, really did. And I actually, funny story, I did something really weird. I came in during the spring semester.
Okay.
So the intro class wasn't necessarily offered in the spring. So I had to like put the intro class somewhere in my schedule. It was one of the last classes I did.
Whatever. You got it on there somewhere.
So here are all of these people who take intro to like figure out whether or not they want to be a therapist or not.
Yeah.
Like I gotta jump in all feet. I can't say no now.
Too
Like
late.
late, I did all the other ones.
Oh, that's awesome. That makes sense though for you. I feel like that
Yeah.
would happen.
And the beautiful part of it is that the professor who taught that class, the
Mhm.
intro class, is a great friend of mine now. We work together in the
Oh,
field.
wow.
We consult on different cases still, and it just wound up working out like the best case of
Yeah,
doing that, but it
that's
worked.
funny. And that's like a good lesson too, though, because I bet some other people, especially if you're a little more type A, might have been like, I can't take it at the end and panicked, but it kind of worked out, especially if you came with like a little bit more experience or knowledge than some of the other people. You were more sure of yourself at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Mhm.
Well, as far as grad school goes, like what were some of the best parts of your program and what were some of the things that maybe you wish had been different?
Mm, so the best parts of the program were definitely the way that it was very much like skills and clinical heavy.
Okay.
So you had like your theories and you had like the application of those theories and then like therapeutic skills. Um, they harped on us to not ask questions.
Mhm.
So like questions had not been a part of like my therapeutic practice because they have told us, no, 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 don't do that. Like that's not a thing. It's so to keep it more conversational. So I think
Mhm.
that my skill set and kind of ease in therapy or compliments that I get is that it feels very conversational.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, because of the ways that they have kind of presented therapy,
Makes sense.
application. Um, con. I think there were a couple of classes that were a little redundant, but like that's pretty much across the board. Um,
Mhm.
I think a big con for a lot of therapy, counseling, maybe even social work, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't teach you about business.
Not at all. Not even a word was uttered about how to start a business, have a business. It was more so like, you'll never make money. And like, good luck with that stuff. But nothing about business.
Nothing about business. And it was kind of interesting because looking back, probably 90% of my professors were in private practice. So I would have loved to have, at least like a business 101 as a
Right.
therapist or business 102 and just have it be part of the program, even as an elective, would
Yeah.
have been, just a nice thing to have. Um, I was a little bit dumb. I decided to go into private practice quite immediately after I graduated, thinking, I could do this. Like,
Mhm.
nope. 6 months. I was like, I need to go work for somebody else. This is like way too far.
Well, tell me why it was hard because I feel like, if this channel is for new therapists, there's going to be people who are thinking the same thing where they're like, I don't want to pay my dues or whatever the stereotype is that you
Mhm.
have to do. And there's a lot that just want to start their private practice and jump into it because they know that's the end goal. So, what do you think about that time didn't work for you?
Um, I think what didn't work was the fact that I had to one advertise. I had to pay for my own supervision. I had to find office space. I had to do all of the business administration stuff on top of figuring out what my skills were, finding my own identity as a therapist. Um, it was just way too much. And I think at the time, like, I didn't have to get the many hours to be fully licensed. It would have taken me years
Mm,
to get fully licensed. And I couldn't afford paying someone to supervise me and then doing all of the other business stuff. It was just going to take way too long. And I don't think that I would have gotten the experience that I do now.
mhm.
Um, so I think all in all, it was the greatest decision to try it, fail at it, and then, go work for other agencies that, were really, really helpful in building me as a therapist.
Yeah. So, what kind of agency did you work at?
Yeah, so I worked at a substance use treatment program. Substance use disorder stuff is like my heart and soul.
Mm.
I really
Was it prior to working there or no?
Yes. So
Okay.
I'd always wanted to do substance use stuff. It kind of fits a little bit more with my style of counseling. They really do kind of appreciate conversation, being very direct,
Mhm.
impacted, realistic. And so I'd always wanted to be in the substance use world. I just didn't know how. I wanted it to happen. I um started working at a substance use agency. I absolutely hated that place. Uh,
Mm.
it was not a good time. They were very segregationalist in mental health and drug and alcohol issues.
Oh,
So
wow.
while I was working there, I couldn't do mental health. Yeah, it was
Right.
really
And
weird.
like the prevalence of co-occurring disorders, like that just doesn't even make sense.
Mind blowing. So I wasn't allowed to work on mental health stuff with their substance use clients. And at the time, they were very much 12-step oriented and very much God related. And for me as a therapist, I find that ethically challenging because I may not have somebody who wants to do the 12 steps. Let me back up a second. I figured out substance use stuff in my internship.
Okay.
Um, I did an internship for the VA in a residential substance use program. Uh,
Wow.
and they kind of gave me a little bit of free reign. Like it's a teaching hospital. The VA is a teaching
Mhm.
agent. So one of our capstones for graduation was at your internship site, find something that they may need that may be beneficial, or if there's a process or program that is in place, um, write a research paper. Well, I did a survey and they found that there was a certain number of percentage of recidivism of clients returning because they failed 12-step programming. So I was like,
Mm.
well, why don't we find something else that works? So me and a colleague introduced smart recovery into that treatment center, and they still use it. They have still participated in incorporating that in their program, to the best of my knowledge. So fast forward, I go to this other place who is very rigid and
Mm.
tells me, no, Victoria, you can't do these other things. I'm like, well, ethically, we're kind of a little bit at odds, but I need you to get my hours, so I'm gonna just hold on tight.
Count the
Until
days and the hours.
yeah, exactly. Until I get my hours, and then I will go, wherever else, is necessary.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, I think there comes a time where you're like, all right, how many hours do I have left? And is it sustainable to just finish this? And then leave the second I have that paper in my hand, that's my full license. So, and plus, like you said, there's got to be a consideration, and this is different for new therapists sometimes, is like, because this wasn't talked about in school very much in my programs,
Mhm.
about like what you ethically feel is right and what you were being told to do.
Mhm.
They never talked to me about like moral quandaries or like things that you should do. It was very like black and white with ethics of like, here's this manual and here's what you shouldn't do as a therapist, but not necessarily what shouldn't be done to you or what you should or shouldn't participate in. So that was great that you recognize like this doesn't feel good to me and this isn't what I want to do.
Exactly. Yeah. I was really struggling. There were days that I would come home crying because I was like, I can't do this anymore. Thankfully, I had created a really great relationship with my colleagues at the VA. And so I knew kind of halfway through my time at that other agency that I could potentially get a job as an LCMHC at that facility doing work there. So I was just biding my time till I could get back to the VA. And every now and again, I'd go see a colleague of mine up there because I volunteered up there every now and again. And I'd just be crying. And they're like, just wait another 6 months. You'll be up here.
You could come home.
Yeah, just hang on.
Yeah, it is tough in that period of time where you're getting your hours because you feel stuck. I mean, it's not like you can't change places, but to do that is a ton of paperwork. It's like all new supervision contracts. There's like a gap sometimes in your hours and it pushes your timeline back and it's just sometimes not worth it.
It really wasn't. I'm so glad that I waited and like I just kind of muscled through it, like reprioritizing and like pro and conning it. Like obviously if it had been that bad, I would have, just ate that and like
Right.
done it. But like no, I'd rather not.
Right. If it was like month 3 of your 2.5 years of getting your hours,
Right.
like you gotta go. But at the end, it's like, all right,
Yeah.
but cool. So then after that, did you go straight to the VA?
I did. I wound up going there halfway through my hours of licensure. I kind of figured if I did a year plus the supervisor that I had was retiring anyways. So,
Mm.
they had to sign off and
Oh,
then just
makes sense.
left it. So it was kind of opportunistic.
Hmm.
So then I went over to the VA and I stayed there for almost 5 years. And then we moved here to North Carolina, and I said, you know what? I want to start my own private practice. I want to include the horses in therapy. I think there's such a great benefit. So it was just a culmination of a lot of learning to get to private practice the way that I am, and I wouldn't change it.
Yeah, I think those experiences are really valuable because there's only so much they can tell you in school. And
Right.
you kind of come out of grad school, most people, where you're just like, okay, I know like the book stuff, I know like the theories, I know, whatever, the history, but not necessarily like how to do therapy in some ways,
Right.
or like what populations really speak to you because you have such limited experience. And so maybe you wouldn't have known had you not.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think that coming out of school, agency work is incredibly important for development of your skills. If I were to come out of my program and then immediately jump in. And I mean, to be fair, I'm 33.
Mm-hmm.
So coming out of grad school, I was 23 years old. And who's going to want to come and talk to me? What life experience do I have to say, hey, yeah, your problem sucks? Like, how can I help you process that?
Yeah.
I recognize my own limitation in age,
Mm-hmm.
time, and it was definitely like repeated to me a number of times, you know. Um, but now I can say, yes, I'm 33, but look at my resume. These are the experiences that I have
Mm-hmm.
as backing to, to what I'm offering to you. So essentially, it kind of actually has helped me out a lot more because I have more experience in all of these areas at a younger point.
Mm-hmm.
My age no longer is a problem.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense though, because I think too, it's like you sort of need that life experience and that work experience to fully narrow down what it is you want to do. Like, who do you do the best work with? Like, you kind of need different things to be thrown at you to then figure out, like, who do I work with the best? Who do I like the best? Who do I feel more fulfilled with after I've worked with them? And also, like, what circumstances you want to work under. Sometimes you don't know. Like, private practice in the beginning could be really lonely. And you might
Mhm.
need that team, not just the one supervisor, to be like, hey, what do I do with this person? And so that's where agency work, I think, is actually really helpful.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. So, as far as experience again as being a therapist, what trainings or courses or anything else that you've taken that's kind of helped build these skills along the way outside of school?
So I have done a number of trainings associated with different approaches for substance use issues. Um, this year I'm actually looking at doing some stuff with like harm reduction and
Mm.
like somatic experiencing kinds of things,
Oh, cool.
to kind of add to that. So a lot of my clinical education is around those kinds of different approaches. Um, I've done Red Road to Wellbriety stuff. So applying indigenous practices to
Mm.
the 12 steps. In Nebraska, there's a big indigenous community and population. So that's been really helpful. Um, and then early on, I got EMDR trained. That was like kind of coming up in the framework of
Mhm.
trauma therapy. And so I was like, I need to jump on this now as an asset. So then that way I've already been experienced in it for 8+ years by this point, to be able to kind of do that.
Yeah, have like another tool to be able to use with some of the clients, especially when it sounds like a lot of the ones that you've worked with have had some sort of trauma.
Exactly. Yeah. The latest one that I did was including equines in the therapeutic process. So
Oh.
that was actually like, I want to say 2 years ago I started that. So I went to a university to do that as a postmaster's certificate. Highly recommend that program as well. It felt weird going back to school.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I did that. And that's been a great asset, because I wind up I've wind up opening up a pathway to ethics for clients. So it's,
Yes.
I could talk about it all day. It's been um an exciting experience to teach people about, animal ethics, and how that applies to them, consent, those very non talked about things that people
Mhm.
don't necessarily pay attention to. So yeah, all in all, I think the continuing ed stuff I pick on what is it that I'm wanting to learn and apply, and how is it fitting in with my system.
That's a really good point about what you want to do, because I think sometimes there's so many trainings, there's so many letters out here that stand for all kinds of things that we don't even know what half of them are. But I think there's like a pressure of, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
all of these people are trained in this one thing. Like, should I be trained in it? And you may feel left behind, or like you're missing out on something, or you're not going to be a good enough therapist if you don't have the same training all these other people do. But it's like if you don't connect with the training or the course or whatever, you're not going to be great at it. You're probably not going to use it.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. Is not just think about like what would be best for your clients, but like what do you relate to? What kind of training do you feel like you could easily use and you connect with that theory or modality?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we're spending a bunch of money.
A
Like, I
bunch.
have to budget how much money I'm spending for CEUs,
Mm-hmm.
what they're kind of gonna, how beneficial is it gonna be for me? How much time do I want to invest in that additional training? How likely am I going to be to use it?
Mm-hmm.
And how is it gonna really help me or hurt me in the long run? I mean, obviously there are times where I'm like, I just need to get a couple of CEUs to get them done for, to count.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I usually try to pick one or two that I really want to invest in. For like my licensures, I have drug and alcohol licenses and mental health licenses. Drug and alcohol ones sometimes have specific requirements. So since I've moved out here, I have decided to go back to Nebraska every year since I've been licensed, like provisionally, have gone to a drug and alcohol conference out in a very small town in Nebraska that is endorsed by the state.
Mm.
And it's a 2-day deal. I will fly back there every single year. I did it last year to
Oh,
get the CEU hours, but at the same time, like I get to see all of the other colleagues that I've worked with, referrals. So for me, some CEUs are more relational, like hang out and learn something at the same time.
yeah, and write it off for
And
business
write offs.
reasons. Yeah, but that's such a good way to put it though. I think for so long there's been this like, I don't know, whatever's the trendier seeming type of therapy that people are like, I need this one, So, but again, if you don't connect with it, it's pointless. So I think that's smart to figure out what works best for you first. And then, all right, can I apply to like the population I work with? And
Right.
that's awesome. So for my last question is looking back at your career, what are some things that you wish that you knew earlier?
Business class.
Mm-hmm. Big one.
Yeah, that one. Um, Learning early on, I wish that I had paid attention to trusting my gut a little bit more.
Okay.
If my ethical foundation was as strong as I can kind of say now, it was back then, because of the training that they've taught me.
Mm-hmm.
School, and had the mentors that I did have, I can trust some of my judgment a little bit more. Um, so I've supervised a number of interns and, provisionally licensed individuals. And a lot of the times the errors that they make are related to not trusting the judgment of the education that they've had. So if they can say that they've had good education, good training, and even just being good humans, they haven't necessarily trusted that so well.
Mm-hmm.
Had they trusted it, the decision would have been a better outcome for them and their client than, oh, well, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't do this, maybe I should do this. And then second guessing that,
Mm-hmm.
I think, is a detriment to the clinical expertise that you're developing. So there have been more times than not, I'm telling, students, interns, and A's, hey, listen, what was your gut telling you? It was telling me this. Okay, why didn't you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't think I could. Yeah, you can. Yeah, your gut was right. Don't, second guess it.
Oh, definitely. And I think some of it's that imposter syndrome that a lot of
Mhm.
new therapists feel, where it's almost like, I don't want to do anything wrong. And you're like so terrified to do something wrong that sometimes I think it ends up being like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you kind of end up doing something wrong for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, they wind up doing so much more wrong than
Mm-hmm.
they actually are doing. It's kind of like breaking the vase, that we're going to further break or further hurt our clients. Yes, that is a possibility
Mm-hmm.
if you're not, following the teaching that you've learned, or participating in ethics. But like, I mean, more times than not, if you're asking the question, did I do it wrong? You did it right. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
You care. And
yeah.
then I think another piece of that, I did a video a couple weeks ago about like safety issues as a therapist and trusting your gut when it comes to certain clients or certain things that you're like, this doesn't feel safe. This supervisor doesn't feel safe. My office doesn't feel safe, whatever it is, and being able to really trust your gut. Because I think most people, again, especially in the beginning years, like you have a tendency to talk yourself out of things. So
Yes.
it's like, it feels like no one else is sounding the alarm, or I don't want to seem incompetent or whatever else. And so you end up learning how to quiet your gut. And that's really there for a reason. And that's been there way longer than anything else has in your training or whatever. So like that has to come first. Then you kind of filter it through some of your trainings and then maybe get some supervision or something if you need to. But your gut is huge in this field.
It is wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine having, having that just go off and then me not listen to it. And then, you know, yeah, to cover your butt.
Definitely. And some of the populations too that you've mentioned, like people who've had a lot of trauma, substance abuse, like there's going to be people, even sometimes in certain agencies or community mental health. I mean, really could be anywhere, but in some of those places, you're exposed to lots of different people and who are going through a lot of different things that are harder to cope with, or maybe don't have the skills yet to cope with them. And so you have to pay attention to your gut. So if you're like, this person is way outside of my coping or my ways of helping them or my skill set at this point, like thinking about referring out, or if there's somebody makes you feel unsafe, like figuring out what to do in that situation.
Yeah, wholeheartedly. I feel like trusting your gut is like a cover your butt. Oh, look, it rhymes.
That's the new slogan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true though. And I think that that's an absolutely great point and something else that was not covered in school.
No.
It's like, here's this theory, here's this ethical board that will take away your license if you do these things, but not
Yeah,
trust yourself.
it's kind of funny. They like scare you about like don't have sex with your clients and
Right.
like all of these other kinds of which, yes, don't do
Like,
that.
don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, but like they scare the living crap out of you for all of these other kinds of things. And then you're like, okay, but what happens really? Like in this situation, how do I
Yeah.
manage a crisis? Which is the other perk of working at an agency is that
Mhm.
you learn those skills, like really fly off the cuff kinds of things. And I am so grateful for that
Mhm.
to be able to know, hey, you know what? Okay, here's someone who is under the influence, suicidal, and homeless. What do I do with that? That's a big thing.
Oh yeah, because it's almost like at that point, it's like the Olympics. Like if
Yeah.
you can do all of that, you could run around the neighborhood with like,
Exactly.
so when later in your career, if you tend to be working with like more high functioning clients or whatever a more traditional setting or whatever, you can, that's like nothing, like you can handle that super easily because you've already knocked out some of like the big skills that you're going to need. So yeah, and that's the type of training that they kind of can't teach you about in school. You got to be there.
Yeah, yeah, you really do. And it just is kind of nice to have those structures in
Mhm,
place to make those mistakes, even though
mhm,
they're not really, but you get to practice all of that kind of stuff and learn, hey, okay, yeah, I should have trusted my gut over here.
mhm.
Here's what I could have done differently at this situation. And yes, it all worked out already, but here's the added learning.
Right. All these learning opportunities you wouldn't be presented with in
Hmm.
other settings.
Exactly.
True. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today to share your experience and to talk about, just the things you've learned along the way. I think there's so much that's not taught in grad school. And I want to make sure that people are getting varied experiences to know like, you're not alone. We've all felt like imposters. We've all had places that we haven't liked that we've worked at. We've all struggled in some way, but it gets better.
It
So,
really does. Yeah. We just gotta put the work in to get there.
yeah, and support each other. So, But thank you so much. So I have linked all of your stuff below the video so people know where to find you, where to see the ponies, and kind of.
Yeah, so that funny that you say that. A lot of people actually just follow me and the farm to get updates on like the potbelly pig, on the horses, on just the animals.
Yeah.
Antics are. So yeah, yeah, that would be great.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, yeah.
and
Go
then
for
if
it.
anyone has any questions or they're like, Victoria, hey, they can all reach out and
Perfect.
yeah, feel free to contact me.
Yeah, so I'll put your contact info below too, so people can reach out. And then, like I said, at some point in the future, we can do another video so you could talk more about equine interactions and
Yes, I would love
some
that.
visual aids and stuff. And then everybody could see the ponies, and I can too. So,
Yes, absolutely. Would be happy to do that.
love it. Well, thank you again.